Hi, I'm Jorgie from POCculture.com. Upload has been such a meaningful show to me personally. And last year it was the first series I had ever covered. So I'm just really excited to get to speak with you today. Thank you for your time.
Oh, thank you. That's really cool to hear.
Yeah, so the first question is a bit of an icebreaker. With the creepy ethics aside with uploading, was there any digital afterlife that you think if you were in that world, it would interest you at all?
Oh, uh, this thought has only recently occurred to me. Funny enough, I haven't really put myself into that. I mean, it's a really tricky question. Where would you put yourself forever? I don't know. I mean, it would be, I just would want it all in some ways. I mean, obviously, I don't want the dark, scary version of the world, but something where you can maybe continue to reinvent it. So that I think the idea of being stuck in like one vision of it would be very claustrophobic to me.
Yeah, that's really cool. We
Yeah.
we know we wouldn't want to be a two gig at least. Um,
No, no.
and the other question was of the cast, like the characters on the show, is there anyone you think you would be like best friends with if you were in that world? I think me and Luke would get along really well.
Yeah, Luke is kind of a fun one, isn't he? I, I don't know. It's a good question too. I like them. I like them all. Like, I think the AI guy, let's say AI guy, I think he would be really fun to hang out with and just sort of like talk and try to help along in the world. I think he's the most endearing character. So yeah, I think if all of them I would want to spend, the first person I would walk up to would be AI guy and say, "Hey,
Yeah,
I need a friend around here. Can you show me the ropes?"
yeah, definitely. He's such a nice spirit. And so,
Hmm.
as a production designer, could you tell our audience a little bit of what your day to day was like working on creating the show?
It depends if you're in prep and shoot, but um, you have a let's just pick a day in the middle of production. So you're always prepping an episode of television and you're always shooting an episode of television. So the first part of the day starts off by going to set, looking, making sure you've obviously just got everything ready the night before, but you're going there and you're meeting with the director and the producers or whoever else is there. I mean, they're all there, but you're making sure that everything that's on that call sheet for the day is going to that they've seen it and that they understand that it's there, and if there's a problem you're going to deal with it. So once that's done, and hopefully you've had something to eat from the catering truck, then you can go back to the office and probably there's another couple of meetings that day scheduled or a location scout. So it's a mixed bag. Sometimes you're rushing to get back, or sometimes you have to go to the next location that you're shooting at the next day and go and improve it and maybe help out a little bit, making sure that's all coming together for the call sheet. So uh, sometimes I've been sitting in the parking lot of a set that we're filming at the next day or in a few days, checking in a construction, and then going into my car and having a Zoom, like a prop meeting in my car, and then that meeting ends, and then going back into set and checking it out. So you're moving around a lot, you're checking with all the different departments, you're problem solving, because when you're doing things so quickly there's always things you can't get or something's breaking, or so it's a bit of a like an ER at sometimes, or department ER. um, and then at the end of the day you go home, you fall asleep, and you get up and do it again.
Wow, sounds very intense. When
It
you're
is.
in the in the more meeting phase, like the pre-production, like the planning, can you talk a little bit about the
Mhm.
research you did? Because I heard you were looking into like AI before it became so mainstream, or with
Yeah,
housing, real estate kind of stuff.
that's right. So because you are 15 years in the future, there's a lot of information out there that's sort of emerging technologies. And so you're looking into it, and once you're starting looking into it, it's even just coming up in your own social media or your algorithm. It starts to be more and more present. And then you're like, oh, that sounds really interesting. I'm going to go deep dive into this. So with technology, and AI, I've definitely like, we were signed up for the Dolly beta before anybody else. And then I remember being in the art department one day and I was like, I'm in, I'm going to try it. And they're like, oh my goodness. Like, even though it was so crude at the very beginning, it really like got so much better. And then from there, you're like, okay, I think Dolly, I've reached the limit of it for myself. And then you're like, I'm going to try Mid-Journey, you know? So you just sort of start piggybacking off of one conversation, learning a little bit more to the next. So, but then when it comes to the real world building 15 years in the future, I'm always interested in what are the new emerging technologies for building, 3D printing. We also, you know, when you're paying attention, you start to understand that the resources like wood and even sand is becoming limited. So how in 15 years do you replace those materials? Well, we know that we have too much plastics that we're dredging out of the ocean. So you start as a creative person, you're like, oh, well, you know, they're beginning to make wood like lumber out of plastic composites. Well, it's not going to be too long then to combine 3D printing and plastic resin composite and just using it to build. So I'm like, let's just build a whole entire set out of that concept, modular, recycled, 3D printed or molded plastic products. And so you just sort of start taking all these thoughts you've had and experiments and things that you're reading, and they all sort of get marinated together. And then something comes out of the script, has something, and you're like, ah, great. These seems like an ideal marriage for these ideas at one time.
Right. It sounds like that kind of influence of like 3D printing of food in the future.
Yeah.
And with that, what was important visually to kind of communicate, like on your end, what is the afterlife and what is the real world when we jump back and forth?
The afterlife is very clean and idealistic because it's very easy to program, and it's becoming so much easier to program a beautiful environment with just a sentence, just words. You don't even have to be a 3D modeler really to come up with a beautiful illustration. It's going to be, I would think, only a few years before you could actually prompt a 3D model and then put it into online and then live in it. So I always kind of think that whenever we're online, it should be the most beautiful version of it, like castles and like the AI classroom had to be a beautiful version of a world from the past because it's just so easy. It's to make it bad is a choice online, right? Like if you wanted to be aged and gross and decrepit, you would actually have to physically make, like not physically, you have to actually choose to make that choice with prompt. Where in the real world, these things happen because of lack of care and funds. Things start to decay and you have to build things smaller because building materials by square foot are so expensive. So you start compromising on the output and also the skill level of the person and the availability of things. So that's what we reflect into the real world. We just apply all these principles in making sure that things look dirty and broken down and decrepit or small and tight when necessary, but that the online world is free of all of that and it's aspirational and wide open spaces and beautiful sunny days and doesn't have any annoying holes in the wall or rats. You know, there'd be no rats in the real world. I mean, like unless you paid for it for some reason.
Right. That made me want to ask you, like, what is it that you love about being a production designer? Is there a certain day where it's just like, wow, God, I love this job?
Oh, it's almost every day I love this job. I mean, even when it's really hard, you're like, I've wanted to work in the film business since I was in grade 3. Like that was what I wanted to do. I saw a movie, I saw Raiders of the Lost Ark, and I was like, there's people behind that camera that are doing that for a living. Like they're making stuff and telling stories for a living. So I was lucky that it all worked out. But being able to like visualize something in your mind, right? Like a set or a room, and then to be able to, in such quick amount of time compared to the real world, like maybe weeks later, stand in it in 3D, like and walk through it, is amazing. It's an amazing job, and it's great to work with writers and directors and producers that all have enthusiasm to bring together, you know, worlds that don't exist and tell stories for a living. And it's very challenging. And like when you're one of your first questions was like, what does my everyday look like? Well, every day is so different that you're not like bored. Sometimes it's overwhelming because it's so stressful with the schedules, but you're not bored. Every day is new. Like, and at the end of one show, you're like, I have no idea what my next job's going to be. It could be futuristic. It could be in the past. It could be procedural. You have no idea. So, not for the weak of heart, but if you like it, you really like it.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for your time. It was a pleasure to meet you, and congrats on the new season.
Thank you. I like your backdrop.
Thank you so much.